The moon had never betrayed Lysandra before. She stood at the window of her childhood bedroom for the final time, fingers tracing patterns on the frosted glass as she watched the carriage that would deliver her to a foreign king being prepared below. The air around her smelled of winter pine and sacrifice. In the morning, she would no longer be Lysandra of the Eastern Pack, beloved daughter of Alpha Darius. She would be something less and something more, a queen without power, a wife without love, a bridge built of flesh and bone between warring territories. The North takes what it wants, her mother had whispered the night before, braiding silver threads into Lysandra's dark hair with trembling hands. But remember who you are beneath their ice. Outside, the moon hung low and full, watching her with the same indifference it had shown for centuries of arranged marriages and political pawns. Lysandra pressed her forehead against the cold glass and closed her eyes. She had been raised for duty, schooled in the art of necessary sacrifice. She would survive this giving away, this surrender. But deep in her chest, where her wolf slumbered restlessly, something rebellious stirred, something that refused to be merely survived. The King of the North might claim her hand, her title, perhaps even her body, but Lysandra made a silent vow to the watching moon that he would never claim her heart. That, at least, would remain her own. She could not have known then how the very same moon would soon turn blood red above their union, marking the beginning of something ancient and inevitable, something neither duty nor denial could long withstand. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. Lysandra stared at her reflection in the ornate mirror, barely recognizing the woman who stared back. Servants bustled around her, adjusting the ceremonial white gown that draped over her slender frame. Beads of sweat gathered at the nape of her neck, despite the cool autumn air flowing through the open windows. In less than an hour, she would be bound to a man she had never met, a king who had agreed to take her solely to secure an alliance between their packs. "You're trembling, my lady," whispered Mira, her handmaiden since childhood, as she fastened the silver clasp at Lysandra's shoulder. "Wouldn't you be?" Lysandra replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm about to be given away like a peace offering." Mira's eyes softened. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories is said to be fair. Fair. The word hung in the air between them. Not kind, not gentle, merely fair, as though this was the most positive attribute anyone could conjure about the man who would hold Lysandra's fate in his hands for the rest of her life. Her father, Alpha Darius of the Eastern Pack, had made the arrangement months ago when the threat of war loomed over their lands. The Northern Territories, with their vast armies and strategic mountain passes, had been encroaching on eastern borders for years. When diplomacy failed, her father had offered the only bargaining chip he believed valuable enough, his only daughter. "All done," Mira announced, stepping back to admire her work. Lysandra rose from her seat, the heavy ceremonial gown sweeping across the stone floor. She looked regal, despite the circumstances, her dark hair woven with silver threads that caught the light, her amber eyes bright against her olive skin. The dress, though beautiful, felt like armor rather than finery. A sharp knock at the door made her heart leap into her throat. "It's time," her father's voice called from the other side. With one final glance at her reflection, Lysandra squared her shoulders and lifted her chin. She would not go to this marriage cowering like a victim. Whatever awaited her in the Northern Territories, she would face it with the dignity befitting her lineage. The journey to the Northern Palace took 3 days. 3 days of tense silence, broken only by the necessary exchanges between her escort and her father's guards. 3 days of watching the familiar landscapes of her childhood fade into the harsh, rugged terrain of her new home. The Northern Palace appeared like a fortress carved from the mountainside itself, imposing spires of dark stone stretching toward the sky. Unlike the open, airy architecture of her father's holdings, this place was built for war, every window a strategic vantage point, every wall thick enough to withstand siege. "Welcome to your new home," murmured the captain of her escort, a gruff beta wolf named Thorn. There was pity in his eyes, quickly masked as he helped her from the carriage. Guards lined the stone steps leading to the palace entrance, their faces impassive beneath their helmets. At the top stood a delegation of nobles, all dressed in the muted colors of the north, grays and deep blues that matched the stormy sky overhead. And in the center, a figure that could only be the Alpha King himself, King Alaric of the Northern Territories was not what Lysandra had expected. Younger, for one, perhaps 30 to her 22 years. Legends of his brutality in battle had led her to imagine someone weathered, scarred by years of warfare. Instead, he stood tall and imposing, his face all sharp angles and cold beauty. His hair, black as a moonless night, was pulled back tightly, accentuating features that might have been handsome if not for the utter lack of warmth in his steel-gray eyes. Those eyes appraised her now as she climbed the steps, measuring, calculating, but revealing nothing of the man behind them. Alpha King Alaric, her escort announced formally, bowing low. I present Lady Lysandra of the Eastern Pack, daughter of Alpha Darius, your intended mate. Lysandra curtsied deeply, keeping her gaze fixed on the stone beneath her feet as protocol demanded. When she straightened, she found the king's cold stare still fixed upon her. The journey was uneventful, I trust? He asked, his voice a low, controlled rumble. Yes, your majesty, she replied, careful to keep her tone respectful, but not submissive. A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed his features before the mask of indifference returned. He gestured toward the palace doors without offering his arm. You must be tired. The ceremony will take place at moonrise. Until then, you will be shown to your chambers to rest. With that dismissal, he turned and strode back into the palace, leaving Lysandra to follow with her small retinue of servants. She bit the inside of her cheek to keep her expression neutral, though humiliation burned through her. She had expected little from this arrangement, but even the basic courtesies seemed too much to hope for. A stern-faced older woman stepped forward, introducing herself as Lady Riona, the king's advisor and steward of the household. This way, my lady, she said, her tone neither warm nor cold. Your belongings have already been brought to your rooms. The palace interior was as austere as its facade. Stone walls adorned with tapestries depicting battle scenes and hunting parties, torches casting long shadows down corridors that seemed designed to disorient visitors. Lysandra committed each turn to memory, determined not to become lost in what would now be her home. Her chambers, at least, offered some comfort. A large four-poster bed with furs piled high against the northern chill, a fireplace already crackling with warmth, and windows overlooking a courtyard where, surprisingly, a garden bloomed despite the harsh climate. The ceremony will begin at the first sign of the moon, Lady Riona informed her. A maid will come to help you prepare an hour before. Thank you, Lysandra replied, then hesitated before asking, Lady Riona, might I ask, what should I expect from the king? The older woman's expression softened slightly. His Majesty is complicated. The North has been at war for most of his life. It has shaped him in ways that may seem harsh to outsiders. I understand duty, Lysandra said quietly. I do not expect love from this union. Good, Lady Riona replied bluntly, because you will not find it. The king has made it quite clear that this marriage is for political purposes only. He will respect you as his queen, but... She paused, choosing her words carefully. He has informed the council that you are to understand that his heart remains his own. The words stung more than they should have. Lysandra had harbored no romantic notions about this arrangement, yet to hear it stated so plainly, that she was unwanted before she'd even had a chance to prove her worth, cut deeper than she cared to admit. I see, she said, lifting her chin slightly. Then we are in agreement. This is a contract, nothing more. Lady Riona nodded, seemingly satisfied with her response. Rest now. Tonight will be demanding. Left alone, Lysandra moved to the window, gazing out at the unfamiliar landscape of jagged mountains and dense forests. Somewhere beyond those peaks lay her home, her past, everything she had known and loved. And here, within these stone walls, lay her future, bound to a man who had already declared his indifference to her. Just breathe, she whispered to herself, pressing her palm against the cool glass. You are the daughter of Alpha Darius. You will not break. As promised, a maid arrived as the afternoon light began to fade. The traditional northern wedding attire had been laid out, a gown of midnight blue adorned with silver embroidery, symbols of the moon and stars woven into the fabric. It was beautiful, in a severe sort of way, like everything else in this kingdom. Lysandra allowed herself to be dressed in silence, her thoughts turning to the ceremony ahead. Among wolf shifters, a mating ceremony was more than just words and promises. It was the formal acknowledgement of a bond that would link their spirits, their very essences. Even in political marriages like hers, the ritual held power. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. To her surprise, it was the king himself who entered, still dressed in the formal attire he'd worn earlier. Instinctively, she lowered her eyes in deference. "Your Majesty," she murmured, "I was told we would meet at the ceremony. We need to speak first," he said, his tone clipped. "Look at me." Lysandra raised her eyes to meet his gaze, finding it as impenetrable as before. "I want to be clear about what this union entails," he continued, pacing the room like a caged predator. "You will be my queen in title. You will be treated with the respect due your station. But make no mistake, this is not a love match." "So I've been informed," she replied, unable to keep a hint of dryness from her tone. He stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing slightly at her response. "You will have duties to fulfill, diplomatic functions, overseeing certain aspects of the court. But I will not expect you in my bed except for what is necessary to produce an heir." Heat rushed to Lysandra's cheeks, both from embarrassment and indignation. "Is there anything else I should know about my role in this arrangement, Your Majesty?" For a moment, something like surprise flickered across his features again. Perhaps he had expected tears or pleading. When he spoke again, his voice was marginally less harsh. "You may maintain correspondence with your family, though all letters will pass through my council first. You will be assigned guards whenever you leave the palace grounds, and you will not, under any circumstances, interfere with matters of state unless specifically asked for your input. Are you quite finished listing my restrictions, or shall I take notes?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. A small act of defiance born from the humiliation of being treated like a prisoner rather than a bride. The king's expression darkened, and for a moment, Lysandra feared she had pushed too far. Then, unexpectedly, a corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but perhaps the ghost of one. "You have spirit," he observed, though his tone suggested this wasn't necessarily a compliment. "It will serve you well at court. The nobles here can smell fear like blood in water." Without waiting for her response, he turned to leave. At the door, he paused, glancing back at her. "The ceremony begins in 20 minutes. Do not be late." The door closed behind him with a heavy thud, leaving Lysandra alone with her racing thoughts. Their first real interaction had confirmed her worst fears. She was to be a queen in name only, a political trophy kept at arm's length. Yet something in his parting words gave her pause. Had there been a warning there? Or perhaps advice? She had little time to ponder this as the maid returned to complete her preparations. By the time she was led to the great hall, the full moon had begun its ascent in the night sky, visible through the high windows that lined the cavernous space. The hall was filled with members of the northern court, their curious gazes following her as she walked the long aisle toward where King Alaric waited. Unlike the elaborate ceremonies of her homeland, this one was solemn, almost austere. No music played, no flowers adorned the space, just the silent witnesses and the ancient ritual that would bind her to the stranger. As she took her place beside him, Lysandra noticed something odd, a reddish tinge to the moonlight spilling across the stone floor. Whispers rippled through the assembly. "A blood moon," someone murmured nearby. "An omen," whether good or ill, no one specified. The high priestess stepped forward, an elderly woman with eyes like chips of ice and skin weathered by the harsh northern winds. In her hands, she carried a ceremonial knife and a silver chalice. Under the watching eye of the moon, we gather to witness the union of Alpha King Alaric of the Northern Territories and Lady Lysandra of the Eastern Pack, she intoned, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "May this bond bring strength to both packs and peace to our lands." The ritual proceeded with ancient words spoken in the old tongue, promises of loyalty and protection exchanged in formal, measured tones. Throughout it all, Lysandra felt the king's presence beside her, not touching, barely acknowledging her existence beyond the required responses. Then came the moment she had been dreading, the blood bond. The priestess raised the ceremonial knife. "By blood shared, so shall your fates be joined." King Alaric extended his palm first, unflinching as the blade sliced across his skin. His blood, darker than she expected, almost black in the strange light, welled up and dripped into the silver chalice. Then it was Lysandra's turn. She did not flinch either, determined to show the same strength, though the cut stung sharply. Their blood mingled in the chalice, which the priestess then raised toward the blood moon visible through the high windows. "Drink," she commanded, offering the chalice first to the king. Alaric took it, his eyes meeting Lysandra's for a brief moment, before he drank deeply. When he passed the chalice to her, their fingers brushed, the first real contact between them. A jolt of something unexpected passed through her at the touch, like lightning crackling beneath her skin. She brought the chalice to her lips, the metallic taste of their combined blood filling her mouth. As she swallowed, warmth spread through her veins, not unpleasant but strange and overwhelming. From the slight widening of Alaric's eyes, she suspected he felt it too. "By the power of the moon and the ancient laws of our kind," the priestess declared, "I pronounce this union sealed. What the blood has joined, let no one tear asunder." A polite round of applause rippled through the hall, though Lysandra noted the lack of genuine celebration. This was a political victory for the North, nothing more. Their king securing an alliance without surrendering any territory or power. The feast that followed was as formal as the ceremony itself. Lysandra sat beside her new husband at the high table, acutely aware of his presence yet feeling miles apart. He spoke mainly to his advisors, occasionally acknowledging a noble who approached with congratulations, but barely glancing in her direction. Hours passed in this strange limbo, until finally the king rose, signaling the end of the festivities. Custom dictated that they would now be escorted to the royal chambers for the consummation of their union. Lysandra steeled herself for what was to come, the final humiliation of this day, to be claimed by a man who had made his indifference to her abundantly clear. But when they reached the royal wing, King Alaric stopped, turning to face the small procession that had followed them. "Leave us," he commanded. When they hesitated, tradition required witnesses to confirm the union had been consummated. His expression hardened. Now, the nobles and advisors retreated, murmuring among themselves but unwilling to challenge their king's direct order. When they were finally alone in the corridor, Alaric turned to Lysandra. "You need not fear," he said, his voice low. "I meant what I said earlier. I will not force myself upon you." Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by confusion. "But the alliance will stand," he finished for her. "What happens behind closed doors is no one's concern but ours." He gestured toward a door to their right. "These will be your chambers. Mine are across the hall. We will maintain appearances in public, but in private, you may consider yourself unburdened by a husband's demands." Lysandra should have felt only relief at this unexpected reprieve. Instead, she found herself strangely disappointed, not at the lack of physical intimacy, but at the confirmation that he viewed her with such complete disinterest that he couldn't even bear to share her company beyond what was absolutely required. "Thank you for your consideration, Your Majesty," she said formally, inclining her head. He nodded once, then turned toward his own chambers. As he reached for the door handle, he paused, looking back at her with an unreadable expression. "One more thing, Lady Lysandra," he said, using her title despite their new status as husband and wife. "The blood moon is considered a powerful omen among our people. Some will see it as auspicious for our union. Others will interpret it as a warning. And what do you believe, Your Majesty?" she asked, finding courage in the knowledge that he would soon leave her alone with her thoughts. Something flickered across his face, an emotion too quickly masked for her to identify. "I believe in what I can touch, what I can fight. Omens are for those who lack the power to shape their own destiny." With that, he disappeared into his chambers, leaving Lysandra alone in the corridor, the taste of their mingled blood still lingering on her tongue. Inside her new quarters, she sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back all day to fall. Not for the loveless marriage. She had never expected anything else. Not even for the cold reception she had received in her new home. No, she wept for the sheer loneliness that stretched before her, a lifetime bound to a man who had declared, in no uncertain terms, that he would never feel anything for her. As she undressed and prepared for bed, Lysandra felt a strange warmth spreading through her body, centering in her chest before radiating outward. She pressed a hand against her sternum, feeling her heart racing beneath her palm. Was this some effect of the blood ritual? She had heard tales of the bond formed between true mates, the deep connection that allowed them to sense each other's emotions, even thoughts. But surely that couldn't apply to an arranged match like theirs. Outside her window, the blood moon hung full and heavy in the night sky, casting its crimson light across her bed. As Lysandra slipped beneath the covers, She could have sworn she felt a tug, a pull toward the door that led to the king's chambers, toward Alaric himself. She turned away from the door, forcing her eyes closed and willing sleep to come. Whatever strange sensations the ritual had awakened, they would fade by morning. They had to. But across the hall, unknown to Lysandra, King Alaric paced his chambers like a caged wolf, fighting the same inexplicable pull, the same burning warmth in his blood. He paused by the window, glaring up at the blood moon as though it had personally betrayed him. "This changes nothing," he growled to the empty room, even as the bond newly formed between them hummed with a power neither of them had anticipated. Nothing at all. Exhaustion eventually claimed Lysandra, drawing her into dreams filled with crimson moonlight and a pair of steel-gray eyes that, unlike their owner, gazed at her with unmistakable hunger. The first rays of dawn broke through her window, waking Lysandra from fitful dreams. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The heavy furs, the stone walls, the smell of pine and snow in the air all unfamiliar. Then reality crashed back. The Northern Palace, her new home, her marriage to a king who wanted nothing to do with her. She sat up, pressing a hand to her forehead. The strange warmth from the night before had subsided, but she could still feel something, a presence at the edges of her awareness, like a shadow just out of sight. The blood bond, she realized. Even a marriage of convenience couldn't escape the magic inherent in the ancient ritual. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Lady Riona entered without waiting for permission, followed by 2 maids carrying trays of food and fresh clothing. "Good morning, Your Majesty," the older woman said, using Lysandra's new title for the first time. "I trust you slept well?" "Well enough," Lysandra replied, unwilling to share the strange dreams that had plagued her sleep. "What are my duties today?" Lady Riona raised an eyebrow, perhaps surprised by her directness. "The king has requested your presence in the council chamber at midday. Until then, I am to show you the palace and introduce you to the household staff who will be under your authority." Lysandra nodded, rising from the bed. If she was to be queen, even in name only, she would learn her role thoroughly. She would not give Alaric or his court any reason to find fault with her. As she dressed in the northern style, a gown of deep burgundy with silver embroidery at the hem and sleeves, Lysandra caught herself wondering what the king was doing at that moment. The thought came unbidden, accompanied by a flutter of awareness through the newfound bond between them. The morning passed in a whirlwind of introductions and information. Lady Riona proved to be a thorough guide, showing Lysandra not only the grand halls and receiving rooms, but also the kitchens, the servants' quarters, the guard barracks. Everywhere they went, people bowed respectfully, though Lysandra could feel their curious, assessing gazes following her after they passed. "They're wondering if I'm worthy of him," she observed quietly as they left the armory. Lady Riona glanced at her sharply. "They're wondering if you're strong enough to be their queen. The North respects strength above all else, Your Majesty. In time, you will need to prove yours." By midday, they had reached the council chamber, a circular room dominated by a massive stone table carved with maps of the surrounding territories. King Alaric was already there, deep in conversation with several advisors. He looked up as Lysandra entered, his expression revealing nothing. "My queen," he acknowledged her with a formal nod. "I trust Lady Riona has shown you your new home." "She has been most thorough, Your Majesty," Lysandra replied, matching his formal tone. "The palace is impressive. It was built to withstand sieges," one of the advisors, a broad-shouldered man with a scar running down his cheek, commented. Beauty was never the priority. "Strength can have its own beauty, Lord." Lysandra let the question hang. "Lord Thorne," he supplied, looking somewhat surprised at her response. "Head of the King's Military Council." "A pleasure, Lord Thorne," she said, inclining her head slightly. "I look forward to learning more about the northern defenses. My father always said that understanding one's fortress is the first duty of a ruler." A murmur of approval rippled through the assembled advisors. Even Alaric's expression shifted slightly, though whether in approval or suspicion, Lysandra couldn't tell. "You've been summoned here for a specific reason," the king said, drawing her attention back to him. "A delegation from the Western Pack arrives tomorrow. As queen, you will be expected to attend the reception and subsequent negotiations." The Western Pack, historically neutral in the conflicts between North and East, but rumored to be considering new alliances. Her presence at these negotiations was significant. It would be the first public display of the new alliance between North and East. "Of course," she replied. "What should I know about them before their arrival?" For the next hour, Lysandra listened attentively as the council outlined the complex political situation. The Western Alpha, a woman named Lyra, was known for her shrewdness and unwillingness to commit to any alliance without significant benefits. The North hoped to secure access to the Western trade routes that would allow them to bypass Eastern territories entirely, a move that would have been seen as an act of aggression before Lysandra's marriage to Alaric. Throughout the discussion, she was acutely aware of the king watching her, gauging her reactions. She kept her expression neutral, though her mind raced with implications. This was why her father had agreed to the match, to prevent exactly this kind of economic stranglehold on Eastern lands. When the meeting concluded and the advisors filed out, Alaric gestured for Lysandra to remain. For a long moment after they were alone, he simply studied her, his gray eyes unreadable. "You have questions," he stated finally. "Ask them." Lysandra chose her words carefully. "These trade negotiations, they would effectively cut my father's territory off from key Western markets." "Yes," he acknowledged without hesitation. "Does that trouble you? Should it not? Despite our marriage, I remain my father's daughter." A hint of something, perhaps respect, flickered in his eyes. "Your loyalty is commendable, if misplaced. You are Northern now, by blood and by oath. Your father understood what this alliance would mean." "Did he?" Lysandra challenged softly. "Or did he believe that binding our bloodlines would ensure fair treatment of Eastern interests?" Alaric's jaw tightened. "Politics is rarely fair, my queen. Your father knew that when he offered you as bride." The casual way he referred to her as a bargaining chip stung, but Lysandra refused to show it. Instead, she asked the question that had been plaguing her since the council meeting began. "What role do you expect me to play in tomorrow's negotiations? Am I simply to sit silently at your side, a symbol of the East's submission to Northern authority?" For the first time, Alaric seemed genuinely taken aback by her directness. He took a step toward her, close enough that she could catch his scent, pine and snow and something wilder beneath. "You underestimate your value," he said, his voice low. "Alpha Lyra will be watching you closely, judging whether this alliance is genuine or merely a facade. If she senses discord between us, she will exploit it." "And is it?" Lysandra asked, holding his gaze despite the sudden racing of her heart. "Genuine." Something shifted in his expression then, a momentary crack in the impenetrable facade. For a heartbeat, Lysandra felt a surge of something through their bond. Confusion, frustration. She couldn't quite name it before he closed himself off again. "It is what it needs to be," he replied cryptically, "for the good of both our peoples." Before she could press further, he turned away, effectively dismissing her. "Lady Riona will brief you on Western customs and protocol before tomorrow's reception. I suggest you rest. The negotiations may last several days." Lysandra recognized the dismissal for what it was, but she wasn't finished. "One more question, Your Majesty." He paused, glancing back at her with barely concealed impatience. "Last night, after the ritual, did you feel—" She hesitated, unsure how to describe the strange sensations, the pull toward him she had experienced. His expression hardened instantly. "The effects of the blood ritual are temporary. They will fade." But even as he spoke, Lysandra felt the flicker of something through their bond. A lie, or at least not the full truth. So he had felt it too. "Of course, Your Majesty," she replied, bowing slightly before taking her leave. As she walked back to her chambers, Lysandra pondered this small revelation. The king had felt the effects of their bond, just as she had, and it had unsettled him enough to lie about it. Perhaps that was why he had insisted they sleep separately, not out of mere indifference to her, but out of fear of what the bond might awaken between them. It wasn't much, but it was something. A tiny crack in his armor that she could perhaps, with time and patience, widen further. Not out of any romantic notion, she told herself firmly, but because a queen with influence over her king would be better positioned to protect her homeland's interests. Yet as she prepared for tomorrow's diplomatic challenge, Lysandra couldn't quite silence the small voice in the back of her mind, wondering what other reactions she might be able to draw from the stone-faced king, who was now her husband. The Western delegation arrived at midday, their procession of dark wooden carriages and mounted guards filing through the palace gates with practiced precision. Lysandra stood beside King Alaric on the steps, adorned in the royal colors of the north, a gown of midnight blue with silver accents that complemented the king's formal attire. "Remember," he murmured, barely moving his lips, "we present a united front." "Of course, husband," she replied with equal discretion, a practiced smile upon her face. The carriage doors opened to reveal Alpha Lyra of the Western Pack, a striking woman in her 40s with auburn hair streaked with silver and amber eyes that missed nothing. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator, her smile pleasant but calculating as she approached the royal couple. "Alpha King Alaric," she greeted, inclining her head just enough to show respect without subservience. "It has been too long." "Alpha Lyra," he returned, his tone cordial if not warm. "Welcome to the North." Lyra's keen gaze shifted to Lysandra, assessing her openly. "And this must be your new queen, the Eastern Alliance embodied." "Queen Lysandra," Alaric confirmed, placing his hand at the small of Lysandra's back, the first public display of possession since their wedding. The touch sent a jolt through their bond, which Lysandra struggled not to react to visibly. "A pleasure, Alpha Lyra," Lysandra said, meeting the older woman's gaze steadily. "The North welcomes you, as do I." Something like approval flickered in Lyra's eyes, beautiful and diplomatic. "You chose well, Alaric." The formal reception proceeded as planned. Introductions made, quarters assigned, pleasantries exchanged. Throughout it all, Alaric kept Lysandra close, his hand occasionally returning to the small of her back, each touch igniting that strange warmth through their bond. It was all for show, she reminded herself, a performance for their guest. That evening, a formal dinner was held in honor of the Western delegation. Lysandra found herself seated between Alaric and Alpha Lyra, a position both strategic and intimidating. As the meal progressed, the conversation turned inevitably toward politics. "I must say," Lyra remarked, swirling wine in her goblet, "this alliance between North and East surprised many. Decades of hostility resolved with a marriage, it's almost poetic. The most lasting peace is often built on stronger foundations than mere treaties," Alaric replied smoothly. Lyra's gaze shifted to Lysandra. "And how do you find your new home, Queen Lysandra? The North must be quite an adjustment after the milder Eastern climate." Lysandra felt Alaric tense slightly beside her. This was a test, Lyra probing for signs of discontent, for any indication that this union was less than harmonious. "Different, certainly," Lysandra admitted with a smile. "But there is beauty in the North's strength. The mountains, the fortress-like architecture, all designed to endure, to withstand challenges. I find that admirable." She felt a flicker of surprise through the bond. Alaric had not expected such a diplomatic response. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing. "And what of your father? I imagine Alpha Darius must miss his only daughter." "My father understands sacrifice for the greater good," Lysandra replied carefully. "As do I." The conversation continued, each exchange a delicate dance of words and implication. By the time the dinner concluded, Lysandra's nerves were frayed, but she maintained her composure. As the guests retired for the evening, Alaric placed his hand on hers, another calculated display. "A word in private, my queen," he said, loud enough for others to hear. He led her to a small antechamber off the main hall, closing the door behind them. For a moment, he simply studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he gave a slight nod of approval. "You handled Lyra well," he acknowledged. "She was testing you." "I'm aware," Lysandra replied. "She's looking for weaknesses in our alliance, and yet you gave her none." There was something like genuine respect in his tone. "Why?" The question caught her off guard. "Because despite everything, this is now my kingdom too. My position, my reputation, is tied to yours." Alaric moved closer, his gaze intense. "You spoke of the North's beauty. Was that merely diplomatic flattery?" Lysandra hesitated, then decided on honesty. "No, there is beauty here, different from my home, but real nonetheless." Something shifted in his expression, a softening so subtle she might have imagined it. Then he stepped back, his mask slipping back into place. "The real negotiations begin tomorrow," he said, his tone businesslike once more. "Lyra will be watching us closely. The illusion of our harmony must be maintained." "As you wish, Your Majesty," Lysandra replied, unable to keep a hint of dryness from her tone. His eyes narrowed slightly. "This isn't a game, Lysandra. The Western Alliance could determine the future of both our territories. I'm well aware of what's at stake, she countered, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. I played my part perfectly tonight, did I not? A muscle twitched in his jaw. You did, he conceded, but tomorrow will be more challenging. As they prepared to leave the antechamber, Alaric paused, his hand on the door. One more thing. Tonight you should stay in my chambers. Lysandra's heart skipped a beat. What? Lyra has spies everywhere, he explained, not meeting her eyes. If word reached her that the king and his new queen sleep apart? Of course, Lysandra replied, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Appearances must be maintained. That night, Lysandra found herself in the king's chambers, larger than her own, dominated by a massive 4-poster bed. The awkwardness between them was palpable, as servants prepared the room for sleep. When they were finally alone, Alaric gestured to the bed. You take it. I'll sleep in the adjoining room. Relief and, strangely, disappointment mingled in Lysandra's chest. That defeats the purpose of this charade, doesn't it? His jaw tightened. The servants have seen you enter. That's enough. He turned to leave, but Lysandra caught his arm impulsively. The moment her fingers touched him, that now familiar warmth surged through the bond between them, stronger than before. She felt him stiffen, knew he felt it too. Alaric, she said, using his name without his title for the first time. What is this? Between us? Since the blood ritual. It's nothing, he interrupted, pulling his arm away. An expected side effect. It will fade. But his voice lacked conviction, and through their bond, Lysandra sensed his uncertainty. He was lying, to her, to himself, about whatever was growing between them. You feel it too, she pressed. Don't deny it. For a moment, she thought he might confess the truth. Instead, his expression hardened. What I feel is irrelevant, he said coldly, as is what you feel. This marriage is a political arrangement, nothing more. I made that clear from the beginning. The words stung more than they should have. Yes, Your Majesty, you've been perfectly clear. Alaric's gaze lingered on her face for a moment longer, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he turned and disappeared into the adjoining room, leaving Lysandra alone with her confused thoughts and the persistent, undeniable pull of the bond between them. As she slipped beneath the furs of his bed, surrounded by his scent, Lysandra couldn't help but wonder if the blood moon truly had been an omen, not of discord, but of a connection neither of them had anticipated nor wanted. A connection that, despite his denials, seemed to be growing stronger with each passing day. Outside the window, clouds obscured the moon, casting the night in shadows as deep as the ones in the king's eyes whenever he looked at her. Shadows that couldn't quite hide the spark of something that neither of them dared to name. Dawn broke over the northern mountains, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Lysandra stood at the window of Alaric's chambers, watching the sunrise with a heavy heart. 3 days had passed since the Western delegation's arrival, and today the alliance would be finalized, or rejected. The negotiations had been tense, with Alpha Lyra driving a hard bargain. Throughout it all, Lysandra had maintained her role as the dutiful queen, offering insights when asked, but otherwise supporting Alaric's position. Each night, she had returned to his chambers for appearance's sake, though he continued to sleep in the adjoining room. The distance he maintained only made the growing bond between them more maddening, like an itch she couldn't scratch, a melody half-remembered. You're awake early. She turned to find Alaric watching her from the doorway, already dressed for the day's final negotiations. Something in his expression seemed different. Less guarded, perhaps, or simply weary from the strain of the past days. I couldn't sleep, she admitted. He crossed to stand beside her at the window, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body, sense the now familiar pull of their bond. Today will determine much, he said, his voice low. Lyra remains unconvinced. Of the trade terms? Of us. His gaze shifted to her face. She believes our union is merely a facade, that there is no true alliance between North and East. Lysandra felt her pulse quicken. What makes her think that? She's perceptive. A shadow crossed his features, and not entirely wrong. The honesty surprised her. What will you do? What I must for the North. His response was automatic, yet something in his tone rang hollow. Before Lysandra could press further, a knock interrupted them. Lady Riona entered, her expression grave. Your Majesties, Alpha Lyra requests an immediate audience, alone with the Queen. Alaric tensed visibly. For what purpose? She wouldn't say, my lord. His eyes met Lysandra's, a silent question in them. She nodded slightly. Very well, he conceded. Use the small council chamber. I'll be nearby if needed. The concern in his voice seemed genuine, confusing Lysandra further. Was it merely worry for the alliance, or something more? Alpha Lyra waited in the council chamber, studying a map of the territories with keen interest. She looked up as Lysandra entered, her amber eyes sharp and assessing. Queen Lysandra, she greeted. Thank you for meeting with me privately. Of course, Alpha Lyra. How may I assist you? The older woman circled the table slowly, like a predator stalking prey. I've been watching you these past days. You play the devoted queen remarkably well. Lysandra kept her expression neutral. I don't play at being queen. I am queen. Yes, Lyra agreed. But are you Alaric's mate in truth? Or merely a political token? The directness of the question startled her. My relationship with the king is... Don't bother with diplomatic evasions, Lyra interrupted. I've received a most interesting message from your father. Ice settled in Lysandra's veins. My father contacted you? Lyra nodded, producing a sealed letter. He proposes a different alliance. Western and Eastern pacts united against the North. He claims your marriage was coerced, that you're essentially a hostage here. Shock rendered Lysandra momentarily speechless. Her father was undermining the very alliance he had arranged? It made no sense, unless he had never intended the marriage to create peace at all, but rather to place his daughter as a spy in the enemy's stronghold. She struggled to find words, her mind racing. I wasn't aware of this. So it seems. Lyra studied her with those penetrating eyes, which leaves me with a difficult choice. Your father offers generous terms. The question is, where do your loyalties truly lie, Queen Lysandra? With the east of your birth, or the north of your marriage? The question hung between them, weighted with implications. Everything hinged on her answer. Not just the Western alliance, but her future. Perhaps even her life. If she sided with her father, betrayed the North, Alaric would never forgive her. Yet if she rejected her father's offer, she would be turning her back on her homeland, her family. But what kind of father would use his daughter this way? What kind of ruler would sacrifice his child for political advantage, then undermine her position? Before she could answer, the door burst open. Alaric stood there, his expression thunderous. Behind him, a guard lay unconscious in the corridor. Forgive the interruption, he said, his voice dangerously soft. But I believe this audience is over. Lyra seemed unsurprised by his entrance. Perfect timing, Alpha King. Your queen was just about to make a most important decision. Alaric's eyes fixed on the letter in Lyra's hand, then moved to Lysandra's face. The bond between them pulsed with tension. Anger, betrayal, but beneath it all, a strange undercurrent of fear. Not for himself, she realized with sudden clarity, but for her. Whatever Eastern scheme you're peddling, Lyra, my queen isn't interested, he growled. Are you certain? Lyra challenged. Perhaps she'd prefer to return to her homeland, rather than remain in a loveless political arrangement. Lysandra found her voice at last. You're wrong, Alpha Lyra. Both Lyra and Alaric looked at her sharply. About what, precisely? Lyra asked. About everything. Lysandra stepped forward, taking the letter from Lyra's hand. This isn't my father's handwriting, nor his seal. It's a forgery, and not a particularly good one. She held the letter toward the nearby hearth, letting the flames catch its edge. My father may have arranged this marriage for political reasons, but he is a man of honor. He would never betray an alliance once made. The paper curled and blackened in the fire as Lysandra turned back to face them both. As for my loyalties, they lie with the North now, with its people. Her eyes met Alaric's, with its king. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, relief, and something deeper she couldn't quite name. Lyra watched the exchange with keen interest. Well played, Queen Lysandra. Though I wonder, was that declaration for my benefit or his? The truth needs no audience, Lysandra replied steadily. A slow smile spread across Lyra's face. I believe I've seen enough. She turned to Alaric. You'll have your alliance, Alpha King. My pack will sign the treaty this afternoon. And the letter? He demanded. A test, Lyra admitted without remorse. I needed to know if your queen's allegiance was genuine. Eastern brides have been known to harbor divided loyalties. After Lyra departed, silence fell between Lysandra and Alaric. He stood perfectly still, studying her with an intensity that made her heart race. "You burned the letter," he said finally. "It was a forgery. You can't know that for certain." "I know my father," she countered, though doubt had taken root. Would her father truly use her as a pawn in such a manner? She pushed the thought aside. Regardless, my decision would have been the same. Alaric took a step closer. Why? The simple question carried the weight of everything unspoken between them. Lysandra hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Because I meant what I said. My loyalty is to the North now." She paused. "To you. Even though I've made it clear this marriage is nothing but politics." His voice was low, strained. Lysandra met his gaze steadily. "You've said many things, Alaric. Not all of them true." His jaw tightened. "Meaning? You claim to feel nothing for me, yet through our bond I sense otherwise." She took a risk, stepping closer, close enough to feel the heat of his body. "You maintain your distance, yet your eyes follow me. You insist we sleep apart, yet each night I feel your presence at the door between our rooms, watching, wanting." Anger flashed across his features. "You presume too much." "Do I?" She reached out, placing her hand against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palm. Through their bond surged a wave of emotion so powerful it nearly took her breath away. Desire, fear, conflict. "Tell me you feel nothing, Alaric. Tell me, and I'll never speak of it again." For a moment, she thought he might do just that. Deny everything. Retreat behind the walls he'd built so carefully. Instead, his hand covered hers, pressing it more firmly against his chest. "Since the blood ritual," he began, his voice rough, "I've felt you. Not just nearby, but inside me. Your presence, your emotions. At times, even fragments of your thoughts." He shook his head, frustration evident. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. Political marriages don't create true bonds. Yet here we are," she whispered. "Here we are," he echoed, something like wonder in his tone. The blood moon, an omen after all. His free hand rose to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite the turmoil in his eyes. "I told myself it would fade, that whatever this is between us was temporary, an echo of the ritual, but it's only grown stronger. Why fight it?" she asked. "Why maintain this distance between us?" Pain flickered across his features. "The last time I allowed myself to care for someone, it destroyed me. My parents, my sister, all dead in the Eastern raids 10 years ago." Understanding dawned. "That's why you hate the East so much." "I believed I did," he admitted, "until I found myself bound to an Eastern queen who defies everything I thought I knew about your people." His thumb traced her lower lip, sending shivers down her spine. "Who defies everything I thought I knew about myself." Before she could respond, alarm bells rang throughout the palace. Alaric stiffened, immediately alert. A guard burst into the room, his expression grim. "Your Majesty, Eastern forces have been spotted approaching the border." "What?" Lysandra gasped. "That's impossible." Alaric's expression hardened. "How many?" "A full battalion, sire. They've already engaged our outer patrols." Alaric turned to Lysandra, his eyes cold once more. "Did you know of this?" "No," she protested. "I swear it, Alaric. I had no idea." "Save your denials," he cut her off, his voice like ice. "It seems Alpha Lyra's test was more prescient than she knew." He turned back to the guard. "Prepare our forces, and escort the queen to her chambers. She's not to leave under any circumstances." "Alaric, please," Lysandra begged. "Let me help. Let me speak with my father." "You've done enough," he snarled. The bond between them suddenly shuddered, closed off from her side. "I was a fool to believe, even for a moment, that this could be anything but what it always was. A ruse to lower the North's defenses." The guard took her arm, but Lysandra resisted. "I had nothing to do with this. Alaric, you must believe me." But he had already turned away, barking orders to the gathering soldiers. Through the bond, she caught only flickers now. Rage, betrayal, and beneath it all, a pain so acute it took her breath away. As she was led away, Lysandra's mind raced. This attack made no sense. Her father was many things, but never reckless. To launch an assault against the northern territories now, when his daughter was within their walls, when a Western alliance was being negotiated, it was madness. Unless someone wanted to ensure that the fragile peace between North and East shattered completely. In her chambers, Lysandra paced like a caged wolf, her thoughts churning. The guards outside her door would prevent any escape, but she couldn't simply sit idle while war erupted, war that might claim Alaric's life. Despite everything, despite his mistrust, the thought of him facing Eastern forces, her people, on the battlefield, made her physically ill. The bond between them might be muted by his anger, but it remained, a constant reminder of what they could be to each other if only he would believe her. Night fell, bringing with it the distant sounds of conflict, shouts, the clash of steel, the haunting howls of wolves in battle form. Lysandra pressed her forehead against the cold window glass, straining to see what was happening beyond the palace walls. Then, a sound behind her, the quiet click of a door opening. She whirled, expecting guards, perhaps even executioners. Instead, a familiar figure slipped into the room. "Lady Riona?" Lysandra gasped. "What are you—" "There isn't much time," the older woman interrupted, her normally severe expression replaced with urgency. "You need to come with me. The king ordered me confined to my chambers." "The king," Riona said grimly, "may not survive the night without your help." Fear clutched at Lysandra's heart. "What do you mean? Is he injured?" "Not yet, but he fights at the front lines, reckless in his fury." Riona's eyes narrowed. "He believes you betrayed him." "I didn't," Lysandra insisted. "I would never—" "I know." Riona's certainty surprised her. "I've watched you these past weeks, seen how you look at him when you think no one notices, felt the bond growing between you. Yes, even I could sense it, though I'm merely a beta." She took Lysandra's hand. "Now come. There are secret passages the guards don't know about." Lysandra hesitated only a moment before following. As they hurried through narrow stone corridors hidden within the palace walls, Riona explained in hushed tones. "The attack isn't what it seems. The Eastern forces bear your father's banner, but their tactics are all wrong. They're driving our forces toward an ambush point in the mountain pass." "How do you know this?" "Because I recognize their commander, Lord Terran, your father's former general, the same one who was exiled 3 years ago for attempting to overthrow him." Terran. The name sent a chill down Lysandra's spine. Her father's once trusted advisor, who had nearly succeeded in a bloody coup that would have placed him as alpha. Only her father's strength and the loyalty of their pack had prevented it. If Terran leads these forces, then they're not my father's men at all, she realized aloud. They're mercenaries, or loyalists to Terran's cause. Exactly, Riona confirmed. And Alaric rides straight into their trap, blind with rage and betrayal. They emerged from the passages near the stables, where a single horse waited, saddled and ready. "Take the North Ridge Trail," Riona instructed, helping Lysandra mount. "It will lead you to the battle. The guards are distracted. You should reach the pass before they notice you're gone." "Why are you helping me?" Lysandra asked, gazing down at the woman who had initially seemed so cold toward her. A sad smile crossed Riona's face. "I was there the day his family died. Watched him build walls around his heart that no one could breach." Her eyes met Lysandra's. "Until you." With those words echoing in her mind, Lysandra rode into the night, her heart pounding with determination and fear. The bond between her and Alaric, though muted by distance and his anger, guided her like a compass toward the man who had, against all odds, become essential to her. The sounds of battle grew louder as she approached the mountain pass. Shouted commands, the clash of weapons, the feral growls of wolves in combat. She reined in her horse at the ridge overlooking the battlefield, the scene below illuminated by torches and the pale light of the rising moon. Northern forces were indeed being driven into the narrow pass, where shadowy figures waited in the cliffs above. The trap was set, ready to spring. And at the front of the northern army, a massive black wolf fought with reckless abandon. Alaric, in his shifted form, seemingly unstoppable as he tore through enemy ranks. Lysandra slipped from her horse, her decision made in an instant. There was no time to explain, no way to warn Alaric of the trap without revealing herself to the enemy. There was only one option. She closed her eyes, calling forth her own wolf, a form she had rarely taken since arriving in the north. The change rippled through her, bones shifting, senses sharpening. When she opened her eyes again, the world had transformed into a tapestry of scents and sounds, the battlefield below now seen through the keener vision of her wolf form, a sleek creature with fur the color of moonlight. Without hesitation, She launched herself down the ridge, a pale streak racing toward the battlefield, toward Alaric. The first Eastern soldiers didn't see her coming. She tore through their ranks with surprising ferocity, driven by a single purpose: to reach Alaric before he entered the pass. The bond between them flared to life as she drew closer, stronger than ever despite his attempt to shut her out. She felt his surprise, his confusion at her presence, then a surge of renewed anger. Traitor, his thoughts accused across their bond. Come to fight alongside your people? No, she projected back, the mental communication possible only between those with a true mate bond. Come to save you from a trap. Doubt colored his response, but he had no time to argue. Eastern forces surrounded them, pressing in from all sides. Back to back, they fought, Black Wolf and White, moving in perfect synchronicity as though they had trained together for years rather than days. Through their bond, she felt the moment his doubt began to crack, felt his growing realization that she fought not against him, but for him. When a blade meant for his throat sliced her shoulder instead, his rage was immediate and terrible, a protective fury that sent their enemies scattering. The pass, she reminded him, as they cleared a momentary space around them. It's a trap. Look at the cliffs. His golden eyes followed her gaze, taking in the archers positioned above, the soldiers waiting to descend once the northern forces were fully within the narrow passage. Understanding dawned, followed by grim determination. Fall back, he commanded through the alpha bond that connected him to his warriors. It's an ambush. The tide of battle shifted as northern forces regrouped, abandoning their pursuit into the pass in favor of a defensive position on open ground. Furious at seeing his trap foiled, the enemy commander, Terran himself, shifted into his human form, bellowing orders to his troops. Advance, you fools. The northern dogs retreat. But it was too late. The element of surprise lost, Terran's forces found themselves facing the full might of the northern army, no longer scattered and disorganized. In the chaos that followed, Lysandra lost sight of Alaric. The pain from her wounded shoulder slowed her reactions, and suddenly she found herself face to face with Terran, his human form armed with a silver blade that gleamed ominously in the moonlight. The Eastern Princess, he sneered, recognition in his eyes. How convenient. Your death will ensure your father never allies with the North. He lunged, the silver blade slicing through the air toward her heart. Wounded and exhausted, Lysandra couldn't move fast enough. She braced for the killing blow, only for a massive black form to intercept it. Alaric's wolf taking the blade meant for her. The silver burned where it made contact with his flesh, drawing a howl of agony that tore through the battlefield and through their bond. With the last of her strength, Lysandra launched herself at Terran, her jaws closing around his throat before he could strike again. The taste of blood filled her mouth, metallic and bitter, as the life drained from her father's enemy. All around them, the battle turned decisively in the North's favor. Leaderless, the Eastern forces, mercenaries loyal to Terran, not her father, began to retreat or surrender. But Lysandra had eyes only for Alaric. She shifted back to her human form, cradling his massive wolf head in her lap as the silver poison began its work, burning through his veins. No, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Please, no. Around them, the fighting died away, northern soldiers forming a protective ring around their fallen king and his queen. Through their bond, she felt his life force ebbing, felt his pain as if it were her own. But beneath it all, she felt something else, a warmth, a tenderness he had never allowed himself to express. I was wrong, his thoughts whispered across their bond. Forgive me, Lysandra. Shift back, she begged. Please, Alaric. The poison works faster on your wolf. With visible effort, his form began to change, the massive wolf giving way to the man. In human form, the wound looked less severe, a deep gash across his chest, the skin around it blackened by silver. Get a healer, Lysandra shouted to the soldiers around them. Now! But Alaric's hand caught hers, his grip weak but insistent. It's too late for that, he murmured. Don't say that, she pleaded. You'll be fine, you have to be. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. The blood moon was right after all. I fought it so hard. He coughed, blood staining his lips. Afraid to lose you as I lost everyone else. You're not losing me, she insisted fiercely. And I'm not losing you. Not now. Not when we've only just found each other. His eyes, clouded with pain, still managed to convey a depth of emotion she had never seen in them before. "We found each other the moment you entered my kingdom," he admitted. "I just refused to see it." The bond between them pulsed with shared pain, shared regret for time wasted in denial and mistrust. But beneath it all, something else bloomed, a feeling so powerful, it seemed to fill the very air around them with warmth despite the chill of the night. "I love you," Lysandra whispered, the words she had never expected to speak to this man falling from her lips with perfect certainty. "Do you hear me, Alaric? I love you, so you can't die. You can't leave me now." His hand weakly cupped her cheek, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "My stubborn, beautiful queen," he murmured, "giving orders to your king even now." And then, before she could respond, his eyes closed, his hand falling limply to his side. "No!" The cry tore from her throat, raw with grief and denial. "Alaric." She pressed her forehead to his, their bond still humming between them, though fainter now, like a candle flame guttering in the wind. Through it, she poured everything she had, her strength, her life force, her love, willing him to hold on, to fight, to return to her. Around them, northern soldiers fell to their knees, heads bowed in respect for their fallen king. But Lysandra refused to accept it, refused to let him go. "Come back to me," she whispered against his lips. "Please, Alaric, come back." And then, as if in answer to her plea, the clouds parted, revealing the full moon above, no longer crimson as on their wedding night, but brilliant silver, casting its light directly upon them. A gasp went up from the soldiers as the moonlight seemed to coalesce around the king and queen, wrapping them in a cocoon of silvery radiance. Within that light, Lysandra felt the bond between them surge with renewed power, not just connecting them but transforming them both. Beneath her hands, Alaric's wound began to heal, the silver poison driven out by something older and more powerful than any weapon, the true mate bond, fully realized at last. His eyes flew open, meeting hers with wonder and disbelief. "Lysandra," he breathed. Joy unlike anything she had ever known flooded through her. "You came back," she whispered, tears of relief streaming down her face. "You called me back," he corrected, his hand rising to tangle in her hair as he pulled her down into a kiss that sealed their bond completely. Around them, the northern soldiers erupted in cheers, the sound echoing across the mountainside. But Lysandra heard none of it, lost in the kiss, in the overwhelming sense of rightness that filled her. When they finally broke apart, Alaric's eyes held none of the coldness she had grown accustomed to, only warmth, wonder, and a fierce devotion that matched her own. "My queen," he murmured. "My mate. My king," she replied, helping him to his feet, as northern healers rushed forward to tend to them both. "My heart." In the days that followed, messengers arrived from the east, not with declarations of war, but with news of Terran's plot, and assurances of Alpha Darius's continued commitment to peace. The Western Alliance was formalized, strengthening the North's position, and securing trade routes beneficial to all three territories. But more significant than any political victory was the transformation within the Northern Palace itself. Where once cold formality had reigned, warmth and laughter now echoed through the halls. The king, once known only for his stern rule and battle prowess, now smiled openly, particularly when his queen was near. And if the people noted how their hands always seemed to find each other, how their gazes lingered with unspoken understanding, they merely smiled knowingly. The blood moon's blessing, they called it, a true mate bond, rare and precious, forged in the most unlikely of circumstances. One evening, as Lysandra stood on their balcony watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Alaric's arms encircled her from behind, his chin resting atop her head. "Do you miss it?" he asked quietly. "The East? Your home?" She leaned back into his embrace, contentment flowing through their bond. "The East will always be a part of me," she admitted. "But this," she turned in his arms, meeting his gaze, "this is home now. You are home." His eyes, once as cold as the northern winds, now warmed as they studied her face. "I never believed I could feel this way," he confessed. "Never wanted to, after losing so much." "And now?" she prompted, though their bond told her all she needed to know. "Now," he said, drawing her closer. "I can't imagine feeling any other way. You've brought light back to these halls, Lysandra. back to me. As their lips met, the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, witnesses to a love that had defied politics, overcome mistrust, and transcended the very boundaries of duty and obligation. A love sealed by blood, strengthened by sacrifice, and blessed by the moon itself. "I love you," Alaric whispered against her lips, the words still new enough to send a thrill through them both. "And I love you," Lysandra replied, secure in the knowledge that what had begun as a cold political arrangement had transformed into the rarest of gifts, a bond unbreakable, a love without end. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.